Thanks, Dave, for the warm welcome as always. Hi, everyone. My name is Émile Cabot. I'm an MVP in Cloud and Data Center Management based out of Calgary, Canada. And this session is going to look at Mac management on Intune and how far it's come over the last few years. So when we look at Apple in the enterprise, the reality is it's already there. Really the question is to what degree, right? Everybody has a few Macs. Now, unless you've got many hundreds of Macs or thousands of Macs, chances are you haven't gone down the road of implementing a tool like Jamf, or formerly Casper. You've looked at maybe some other solutions around there, but either price point or other consoles or the integration components just weren't exactly that right fit. And so what ended up happening is the Mac guy at the organization, the one guy who actually knows the tool inside out and backwards, ends up becoming the support for the entire organization. Now, chances are he's not in the service desk. He's probably not even in IT, right? Oftentimes it's guys in the marketing department, the graphics department, or, even in the developer side that ends up being the one that went towards the Macintosh route and becomes the support for that organization. This is actually a pretty big problem, right? From a productivity standpoint, that guy now has to do a lot more work that he was really not hired to do and is probably well overqualified for. And of course, that's a problem for management because now they have issues tracking his productivity for his assigned role. For IT management, now we have a whole suite of assets that we effectively don't manage and don't have control over that life cycle for. So from a security perspective, what that means is there is no real assurance that we don't have a major case of configuration drift across the Mac environment. And we really don't have visibility into what controls have or have not been implemented. So looking at what's been added into Intune for us to manage Apple, it's incredibly developed since I first looked in there. The last time I looked into Macs, which frankly was quite a while ago and a couple of console revisions ago, we basically just had the ability to import custom scripts to configure the devices, and that was it. And from a adoption perspective for a new tool, that really didn't drive much help. Now, in the last few months, I worked on a project where I actually had resources from Apple engaged, and we went through all the settings in here and configured them optimally for the organization. And it really did. It blew my mind as to the stuff that was now available to us, right? So when we look at a workstation, and I guess specifically a Mac workstation, we'll first ask ourselves, what do we actually need to do to manage that? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to get that out-of-box configuration done. We need to get the device enrolled into Intune. We need to get it listed in supervised mode so that we have additional management over it. So that means it has to be into Apple Business Manager. We're going to want to put down some device configurations on it. The home screen or the startup screen in a Mac has all the accounts by default. Right, we need to change all of that. We've got to get our device connection certificate for port authentication turned on. We've got to get the wireless profile configured for the Macs. A lot of these don't have network cards anymore, or Cat 5 cards anymore, so they only rely on wireless, right? From an ongoing perspective, we'll need to manage, just like Windows, right? We're going to need to manage those Mac OS level updates that come down remediate security vulnerabilities and introduce, the new features as a user on a device would want. Over and above that, of course, we're going to need application deployment capabilities. For a managed Mac, we're going to need to make sure that Office can go down at a bare minimum. We're going to need monitoring on the device. We need to make sure that the update policies and the configuration policies that we've assigned to them have actually applied. Maybe we're going to need to employ some restrictions onto there to prevent things like AirPrint. And what else would we really need? Right? And that was kind of how we looked at it. And going through and setting it up, it really showed that, we went back through and looked at the configuration docs that guy had been using for a couple of years now, and literally just walked through and line by line were able to implement every single option that he had on that document. So I was very, very impressed with what was added. So from what we have Intune MDM. You can't do mobile application management for Mac OS, which gripes me. But in reality, Mac OS is not a mobile operating system. It's a workstation operating system. So I kind of understand the logic there. But again, looking back and really from a high level perspective, a lot of times I see the Macs in enterprise, or some Macs in enterprise, are personal devices, right? Procurement would not buy them for them, so they went out and bought them themselves. And it would be nice to have that light touch ability to control access on Mac OS devices. Apple Business Manager, I mentioned earlier, is a free service from Apple. And effectively, all you need is a Dun & Bradstreet number and an incorporated organization to set up. What's funny is if you've corporate purchased devices through, CDW or whatever distributor, the corporate provisioning process requires those devices to be added into Apple Business Manager. So if you guys haven't done this yet, that means that the people that you bought your devices from actually have your device in their Apple Business Manager, which is fine. It's perfectly fine because that's the procurement mechanism. But if you're going through and you want to take your existing Apple iOS devices and Mac OS devices and put them into your Apple Business Manager, you're going to have to go back to the organization that you originally procured them from and have them port the serial numbers over from their portal to yours. Now, based upon the method that they originally inputted those devices into their business manager, they may or may not have them tagged with the purchase order number for the actual order. So depending upon the company that you've purchased them from, they may need you to actually provide them with a list of all of the serial numbers that you own before they know which ones to port over into your Apple Business Manager tenant. Once all the devices are in Apple Business Manager, then what you can do is you add a connector to Intune and you just assign Intune as the MDM authority for those devices. And then within 8 hours, they're enrolled. It's pretty seamless, actually. Now, one of the gripes that I did have about going through this process came down to application deployment and the whole process to get a application packaged and deployed out to Macs. So this isn't, I'm not even really going to point the finger at Apple here because really the process for packaging applications for Windows devices is pretty crappy in Intune as well. Effectively, what you need to do from a Mac perspective is you need an actual Mac. So you got to have a IT test device already to properly manage this, and that means a purchase for a lot of organizations, right? Because that guy that did it before, he had his own Mac, right? So we're going to need to buy a Mac. And on that Mac, just like in Windows, you've got a wrapper that you need to run to package up the Mac application, and then you can upload it into Intune for deployment. Okay, so device features inside of here. Lots of different places for domain options. I was very surprised looking at, if you look at the Windows configuration, they almost force you to go down the AAD only world, and it's really a lot of effort to get the domain portion, the AD domain portion integrated. From a Mac perspective, domains are everywhere, all over this configuration. So we're allowed to define all kinds of trusted domains in here. And when a domain is trusted inside of the Mac, that basically includes all the applications and stuff that comes from those domains and things that comes from that source. So it's really, really neat, especially for schools, right? Because inside of schools, what this will allow us to do is fabricate out our labs based on domains and subdomains and all kinds of cool, wonderful stuff. Anyway, so after that, we have content caching. Content caching is kind of like Apple's version of branch cache. And what it'll allow you to do is download content to a device and then share it out from that one. There's configuration settings in here so that you can select or isolate a device for content caching. And then you have options, configuration profile options in here to ensure that, the device can't be shut down, so that it's always made available. And then there's full SSO integration in here with Azure AD and also Kerberos for those domain join machines. You can domain join a Mac in this process as well. You just need a connector, and that works pretty seamlessly as well. So from the device restriction perspective, there's not a lot that we can do in here, and that's kind of what you'd expect from Apple, because Apple really doesn't like you to alter the end user's experience. What we do have in here is some stuff for the camera, which is a required, it's required to be disabled in a lot of organizations once you come on premises. So all cameras have to be disabled by policy. So that's one important one that's in here, and that is in here. We also have the ability to define the iCloud backup settings. And this is very important from a data loss perspective, because if corporate data is allowed to be backed up to iCloud, then let's say that we go through and we back up our device to iCloud today, and it's got a whole bunch of corporate data on it, and all that gets backed up to iCloud. And then tomorrow I get terminated. On Wednesday, I can go in, or on Thursday, I can go in and restore my phone from backup. And then as soon as the restore is done and it's rebooted, I can take it off the network, and then I have access to that data until I turn online again. So there's a data loss issue there that we really need the ability to block, and the setting does allow us to do that. Connected devices allows us to configure some very limited settings on our Apple Watch. Not really much in there. Password is effectively the same password settings that we have on group policy. And we need to make sure that password settings inside of the Mac, both the Mac configuration and the Mac restrictions, there's a place in there to configure these password settings. If you're going to configure them in both, they need to be exactly the same in both. If you have overriding or conflicting policies inside of your device configuration and device restriction policy, it's going to cause you problems. So make sure that those are 100% accurate before you go through and turn this one into policy. One of the big things that we don't have in here, both on Mac OS devices and on iOS devices, is the ability to prevent screenshots. Although anybody that's arguing this point can say, I can use another device to take a screenshot of what's on the screen of the first device. And yes, that's true. But in the same respects, from a data loss perspective, I can't prevent somebody from looking over your shoulder and viewing what's on your screen. That doesn't mean that I shouldn't implement DLP on your device because somebody has the ability to do that. I think I still need that extra control. And I, especially implementing MDM, iOS MDM into finance, the inability to prevent a managed corporate owned device from being able to take a screenshot is an issue. Endpoint protection. The endpoint protection options inside of Mac OS are pretty basic. Effectively, we have the ability to turn on or enforce File Vault, which is the Apple's file repository storage thing. We have pretty good firewall configuration in here. We can configure the endpoint firewall on the device very, very well. But that's really about it. There's not much on here. No native antivirus. Now, in the last couple of months, Microsoft and Apple have released the Microsoft Defender ATP client for iOS devices. And right now, it's still pretty early on the dev cycle. There's not a whole lot that you can do through it, and it's not even providing a whole lot of monitoring right now. But it does connect. So we at least see the machine in the list. Where I'm hoping to see ATP go, the Microsoft Defender for ATP client go inside of Apple, is provide that full level of antivirus on the device that we've grown accustomed to with ATP for Windows. So where having your Macintosh environment integrated into your Intune environment really helps is the biggest one is conditional access policies. The conditional access policies, as I mentioned in my other session, have chances are already been implemented in your organization prior to deploying Intune. It's usually one of those things that you do when you start making your workloads accessible from Azure. So having Mac OS managed will allow us to configure or alter our conditional access policies to include Mac OS compliance as well, which is important because, as I mentioned earlier, Mac OS can't be done through MAM. Not only work from anywhere, but this will allow our end users to work from anything. So whatever device they're comfortable with, Mac users, like Windows users, are comfortable with their platform, and making them change because they have to go to a different location to work, as an example, it is unacceptable to them in the 21st century. So, this gives them the ability to work however way they want to be most productive. Now, from IT, this gives us the ability to manage our inventory data and get a full list from a single console of all of the devices that we not only manage, but also are connecting into our environment. And of course, from a sign-in perspective, this will allow us to know how often these devices are being used. And it puts the device into that same management life cycle as everyone has grown to accept with the Windows world, right? So now security can go to the same point of contact inside of desktop engineering to get compliance reports for Macs as they do with Windows. That sounds small, but it's a very, very frequent request. And without having that single pane of glass to provide them, usually generates both more work and more questions. So if you have Macs in your environment in closing and you don't have a management system for them today, look at using Intune to manage them. You will require an MDM license for the user that does connect with the Mac. So it does require that enterprise mobility plus security bundle, or the Intune license. I hope this was helpful for everyone, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks.